it's very hard for me to put myself in those shoes because I wasn't a soldier and I wasn't in a war torn area and I never worked with the CIA and how
Yeah.
that all goes down. But I would imagine,
And, murder.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm glad I didn't have to come to grips with that after.
objectively the guy is a bad guy. Objectively, it sounds like the evidence points to he literally killed the first guy in Afghanistan who was one of your guys. It is a war torn area. I'm kind of like, I guess, steel manning this case here as
Yeah.
to what it was. You know, him not being around to be able to do those things would probably be a good thing. At the same time, though, we talked earlier about how things looked and how it can be stupid sometimes. Like, oh, why do you have wood over your covering right there just for
Yeah.
safety precautions? In this case, though, I know it's fucking crazy at that time in Afghanistan. There's a lot of stuff happening. But if, somebody at ABC News or CBS News got a hold of some story where, some Delta Force case officer, whatever you want to call him, guy, killed a dude at a sit down, and even if it got
Yep.
spun the wrong way and they didn't actually have the exact story how it went down, the effect that could have, the third order effects that could have compared to just taking this one guy off the battlefield actually are probably worse. No?
Yeah. And that's funny how things can spin that way,
Yes.
right? And in the agency, there's a saying that no matter how much secrecy that we use in something, you always have to figure that someday somebody's going to leak it and it's going to be on the story on the Post. And, so you kind of have to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my fourth CIA team. So in 2001 and 2, as a soldier, I was on 4 different CIA teams.
That's a lot I mean, it's very hard for me to put myself in those shoes because I wasn't a soldier and I wasn't in a war torn area and I never worked with the CIA and how
Yeah.
that all goes down. But I would imagine just from like a relationship building, trust building, and high stakes life and death situation scenario, moving from team to team like that during such a red hot time in that country has got to be stressful, no?
Yeah, but on one hand, I was a chance, and I was in my 40s, right? And I'm living out my childhood dreams, man. I'm in a place. There's no rules. It's me, and me and rules never got along great anyway. And it's Wild West. You're out there. I've had to negotiate my way through checkpoints that are manned by some Afghan guy out in the middle of nowhere, and it's either we're going to shoot or we're going to come to an agreement. It's like the Wild West where you walk into town and meet somebody on the street, and those, it's to be honest, it was pretty thrilling. It has chances. I'm a believer in servant leadership, and I used that. So with the local Afghans that I worked with, I tried to share in their hardship, take care of them. I would make sure that guys would have, these really poor guys, that you had hot tea to drink in the middle of the night, or take care of them. I would help them unload trucks. Like we would go do a raid on a weapons cache or something. I would try to help unload the vehicles and trucks, and other people didn't do that. And the Afghans started being protective towards me. And, to be honest, we kind of bonded. There was one time when we were in Orgun, I started doing all these raids on hidden weapons caches buried under villages and stuff like that. And they were really doing well. I started collecting. But when you go and do these raids, there were stuff that was hidden in the 80s during the fight against the Soviets.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of it was unstable. The protective casings were gone. Mines, explosives, RPGs, thousands and thousands of rounds, mortars, everything imaginable. And what would happen was we would load them in some local big truck. You've seen in movies stuff, the Jenga trucks from Pakistan, those trucks. So we would load that full of these unstable explosives and take them back somewhere where they could be disposed of. So the way that would work would be the two lowest ranking Afghan villagers would get in the truck to drive it, and everybody else drives a few hundred meters away. And I got where I started doing these pretty often, and I always felt bad for you guys. And I remember one time, it's these two guys, and they're playing music, a cassette player, because now that with the Taliban gone, for the first time in a good number of years, Afghans can play music. So they were in there, and they got in a truck, and I said, screw it, inshallah. And I wanted to show them that I would share their hardships with them. So I tapped on the side of the truck, and the guy, and I said, I'm coming in. And I climbed in that truck with them. And they didn't believe it, because not even the other Afghans would get in that truck. And for sure, not many Americans would. We had a truck like that disintegrate in Yemen when I was there. I mean, the explosive kicked off, and the Yemenis driving that truck, just disintegrated. They were gone. And but I was kind of like, inshallah. But after you do stuff like that, with the Afghans, the word got around that, Americans will look out for you. Americans can help you. Here's a guy that he'll share that risk with you. So I depended on that in those times, that hopefully I had built enough of a bond that if an Al-Qaeda guy infiltrated and wanted to try to kill us, that somebody would care enough about me to at least give me a heads up, so that it would help. Plus, it's just the way I believe, to be, and that worked. And I think that same thing was at play later when I turned Taliban people or worked with locals. You think you just kind of, as much as you can, are straight up with people and show them you're a human too. And you get people, surprising what you can get people to go along with you and do that when you do that.
Did it get harder though as time went along? And what I mean by that, to be a little more specific, is thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.